Hello, and welcome back to Culturopolis, the show where I give my thoughts on the latest pieces of media releasing this month in culture. In the month of July, we saw the monumental event that is Barbenheimer take place. I'll be taking a look at both Barbie and Oppenheimer shortly, but I just wanted to mention how great it was to witness people going back to the cinema with such excitement, people wearing pink for Barbie or going out in suits for Oppenheimer or vice versa. It was just fantastic to witness. We'll also be looking at Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Asteroid City, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and Talk to Me. And so, without further ado, this is Culturopolis. First up, I watched Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. After his goddaughter Spark's interest in an old treasure, Indy must get back into the swing of things, going across the globe to find the other half to the Dial of Destiny before the Nazis do. I've always liked the Indiana Jones movies, even the Cave of the Crystal Skull I actually liked, but hearing a year or two ago that Harrison Ford would come back in his most famous role, I was just dreading what would come out. And what I got was about what I expected. This has got to be a flailing disaster, borderline imitating the charm of the previous movies, disgracing some fan favourite characters and creating new ones that are just so unlikable. I was questioning how the filmmakers even comprehended audiences would like them. So first off, the treasure itself, I mean, it's fine. The dial that belonged to Archimedes and the secret power that it holds is a cool idea, but they barely do anything at all. I personally feel that there is a lot more that could have been done with such an idea. I mean, the ending does play with it a little bit, but I feel as though they could have embedded hints, or at the very least had the treasure act as a greater piece of the story, rather than only have its true effects in the final act of the film. Then there's the characters. Indiana Jones is still the best part, but the horrible CGI de-aging at the beginning was just far too distracting. And I absolutely love Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I love Fleabag and all the comedy, but her character in this film was just absolutely dreadful. She constantly stabs Indy in the back, she lies, swindles and steals from him. Absolutely no viable reason, with no respect or care for either Indiana Jones or even herself, until she randomly remembers, oh yeah, Indiana Jones is my godfather, and then she decides to like him again. There's not one single likeable aspect to the character except for who is playing her. Personally, I felt this was at the fault of the script, because there's no way they thought that a joke about capitalism from her would suddenly warm audiences to the character. It's ridiculous. And then there's also the villain, played by the guy who plays European villains now in Hollywood, Mads Mikkelsen. I do like Mads Mikkelsen, and whilst it first seemed like they were doing something interesting with the idea of a Nazi scientist who now works for America, he was just very bland in this movie. Everyone on screen is just that bland, and it made the whole experience very tiring. I really hope this is the end for Indiana Jones. Maybe not the ending he deserves, but an ending nonetheless. I would honestly argue it's not worth watching, and that Crystal Skull was actually a far better final tribute to the character. What you get with Dial of Destiny is 20 minutes of poorly de-aged Harrison Ford, boring characters, nonsensical writing, and forgettable action set pieces. If anything, the movie is proof that the franchise itself belongs in a museum. Next up is Asteroid City. This is the new film from Wes Anderson. A family go to Asteroid City for a science fair, only to be greeted by an alien. The whole of Asteroid City goes into lockdown as we see the people of the city and the participants of the science fair deal with this unearthly discovery. I always love a Wes Anderson movie. He has a fantastic style to his work, which has just become infamous, and Asteroid City is the next in a long line of fantastic films. In a similar way to his last film, The French Dispatch, which was a tribute to the newspaper, Asteroid City is a tribute to theatre. I won't give much more away than that, because not much is revealed about that in the trailer, but I did love seeing the care that Anderson put into recreating a theatre production and showing respect to that craft. A big draw for this film is the all-star cast. It's phenomenal. You have some common actors for a Wes Anderson film. You have Tilda Swinton, Adrian Brody, Willem Dafoe, but you also have some other big names like Bryan Cranston, Scarlett Johansson, Margot Robbie, and Maya Hawke, and many, many more. This, like many other Anderson films, is a feat in casting and scheduling. And you know, there's some actors who you wouldn't expect to be funny, and yet they really were on screen, and it was good to see. Like Scarlett Johansson, for example, I thought was phenomenal in this. However, I didn't connect to the ensemble of characters emotionally, despite the tremendous actors behind them. I think it would have helped if Anderson scaled down the time we spent with some of the minor roles, such as Steve Carell or Maya Hawke, as they didn't really bring much, and I would have liked to focus on some of the others like Tom Hanks' character or the kids in the science fair. I did like the structure, and I liked what Anderson did to preface each segment of scenes. It helped the pace of the movie, I thought, and also fit into his style of filmmaking. And that very style was a great aspect of this movie. I liked the use of models and stop motion. However, if I had to make one complaint, this wasn't quite as creative in terms of colour or looks as some of Anderson's previous work. If you're already a big fan of this director, then you should absolutely dive into Asteroid City. However, it would not be the first film I recommend to someone who has yet to watch any of Anderson's filmography. Still a fantastic movie, but certainly not my favourite. Tom Cruise is back yet again for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Ethan Hunt is sent on another impossible mission to retrieve a mysterious key that unlocks something. The government suspect it is some sort of world-ending device and want to get it before any other interested parties. Included within that list of parties is the artificial intelligence called the Entity, which plans to overthrow all governments. Ethan and his team, including Hayley Atwell, plan to find out what the key unlocks and destroy the Entity. Now, just before breaking up last month, I had never seen a Mission Impossible movie, and after disclosing this information to a friend, we obviously had to watch all 6 over the course of 2 days. And I've got to say, it was brilliant. If you have yet to see any of the series, I would highly recommend all of them, and the latest film is no different. Dead Reckoning Part 1 right away opens with a fantastic shootout in the desert before giving a classic mask reveal that kicks off the movie. The whole way through is a high-octane adventure, whether that's with the action sequences or the dialogue, which I found was a bit of an exposition dump, but the directing and pace of the scenes meant I wasn't bored. The story itself isn't much to fuss over, but then again, who's going to see a Mission Impossible movie for the story? I mean, yes, there's some plot holes and certain minor characters in this movie particularly that just make some stupid decisions, but who cares? Because Tom Cruise literally drove a motorcycle off a cliff, jumped off of it, and then parachuted into a train. Now, I've always believed, and I will continue to believe, that these movies are just an excuse for Cruise to do some of the craziest stuff for our entertainment, and it's fantastic. The stunts in this film are great. Arguably a step down from Fallout, but still jaw-dropping when you see them, especially on the big screen. I also loved all the callbacks to previous films, like Tom Cruise doing some magic tricks from the first film, as well as a very similar final act which takes place on a train. Only thing I would say I wasn't too big of a fan of was the villains. I felt the artificial intelligence, the Entity, was a bit underwhelming. There's maybe one good scene where they use AI technology with the film, but other than that, the Entity is just some dark force that somehow knows exactly what will happen. The real villain in my eyes is Gabriel, who has some unknown history with Ethan, but I'm guessing that won't be revealed until part 2. I felt that they either should have brought back an old villain, or better yet, actually flesh out Gabriel's character so you're not juggling all these different unanswered questions. Other than that, this was a really good installment in the series. I would definitely list it within my top 3 of the Mission Impossible movies, but Fallout still remains the best one. If you get the chance, definitely watch this movie in the cinema, because the big screen and loudspeakers were made for this type of experience. Now we're talking about the new Christopher Nolan movie starring Cillian Murphy, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, Alden Ehrenreich, Benny Safdie, Josh Peck, Jack Quaid, Devin Bostick, Dane DeHaan, Gary Oldman, and much, much more, but this bit is taking too long. We're talking about Oppenheimer. This is a biopic about Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. We follow his life from early in university to becoming a professor, where he became associated with communists. He then led the Manhattan Project during World War II, where he and a group of scientists lived in a remote town and for years developed the atom bomb. After the war, his former connections to communism are investigated when he is accused of working as a Soviet spy. All of this is intercut with a hearing which determines if Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr., is fit to be a member of the US Senate. There's a lot going on. Now, many people, including myself, were excited for Oppenheimer. That is mostly because of Christopher Nolan. Yet again, he does not disappoint. This movie is built on triumph after triumph after triumph. First of all, the cast, which is just simply bonkers. You have your Nolan regulars with Cillian Murphy and Gary Oldman, but then you have some of the greatest actors of our time like Matt Damon and Florence Pugh, all of them bringing their A game. Even some of the smallest characters have recognisable names behind them, and they're not just there for the sake of it. You can tell everyone had to care for the roles they were playing and for Nolan's vision. Another triumph is the technology in the production of the movie. Oppenheimer was shot on 70mm film, which is the greatest quality form of capturing image available. Now, I've seen Oppenheimer 3 times in the standard format, in 35mm IMAX and in 70mm IMAX. I'm so happy that I got to see it first in 70mm IMAX, because that version of the film is just, of course, the best way to see it. The visuals and the sound just completely suck you in. It was such a huge treat that I am very grateful for. However, even if you don't have a theatre with an IMAX screen available to you, what you see will still be the best version possible, and the story is just as captivating in standard format. The final triumph is simply the product itself. This is not only a gripping movie from start to finish, but it's also beautiful. Starting with the actual narrative, Nolan juggles 3 separate time frames throughout the film. You have the one that shows Oppenheimer's time from education to development of the atomic bomb, another which focuses on his indictment hearing, and the other black and white time frame, which is the POV of Strauss. I don't know if it's pretentious to say, but the film does require you to pay attention and give a little something back, just to get an idea of what's going on. Some people might argue that's a negative, but I really can't see any other way that this film could have been made. I definitely appreciated going in to see it a second time, because from that I got a better understanding of all the moving parts, as well as being able to properly take in the visuals of the movie. Speaking of those visuals, it is an understatement to say Nolan took advantage of those IMAX cameras. What most people expect from IMAX visuals are the big explosions and car chases and driving a motorcycle off a cliff, but Nolan reinvents what can be done with IMAX by instead turning attention to the acting. So much of the beauty of this film is just in Cillian Murphy's face, not just because he's a very beautiful man, but also witnessing those minute expressions, the tiniest of twitches. His displays of emotion in this film are just amazing. But then there are some other visuals, such as those big explosions, for example, tied beautifully with the incredible sound design, are just tremendous. One thing I picked up on was the repeated use of rain droplets. It's the very first thing you see and one of the last things you see in the film. Personally, I took this as Oppenheimer constantly envisioning the chain reaction of the atom bomb. The droplets of the water create ripples that bounce off of one another and collide again and again. It's a lot like the chain reaction of the atomic bomb. He sees it constantly. His creation and its effects consume him forever. I genuinely believe Oppenheimer is a perfectly crafted story that captures one of the most important men in history. This is a film you must see. I honestly just cannot get over the fact that it was made. I mean, you have an R-rated biopic shot on the most expensive format with an astonishing $100 million budget. It's insane for any production company to make it. But if anything, that and the tremendous success of the movie so far are a testament to the reputation of Christopher Nolan. After talking for what felt like 3 hours there, we next have a small indie movie you might have heard about. It's some doll. So apparently she is a Barbie girl, and she's living in a Barbie world, right? She allegedly, don't quote me on this, made of plastic, which doesn't sound too pleasant if you ask me, but she says it's fantastic, so... Barbie stars Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling as Barbie and Ken, who both leave Barbie Land and go to the real world. This is because whoever is playing with Barbie in the real world is upset, and that transfers to Barbie in Barbie Land. The plan is to help whoever is playing with Barbie and return everything back to normal. This is the new film from Greta Gerwig, both as director and co-writer. It's definitely much different to her previous work. For one, it's a much bigger budget and overall a lot more energetic in its atmosphere. One thing that I found interesting with Barbie was before a single still had released, before trailer, before anything, there were a lot of critics for the film. People saying that Barbie shouldn't have a movie made because it reinforces unrealistic body standards for women and all of the damaging history Barbie has behind its lifespan. Then going into Barbie, not only did they acknowledge this history, but they embrace it, whether that's through jokes or tackling the issues head on. It was a big surprise for me personally, because I expected something along the lines of the Lego Movie, which wouldn't have been bad either, but it was nice to see a much more original take. Mind you, the structure of the plot I thought was quite typical of this genre, whether that's compared to the Lego Movie or Elf or enchanted, but instead of just doing that fish out of water shtick that we already know, Barbie adds the extra level of tackling ideas such as women's rights and the patriarchy, which are closely tied to the history of the toy. Like its theatrical twin, Oppenheimer, Barbie has a tremendous cast. You have noticeable names such as Emma Mackey or Will Ferrell, but the best part of this movie when it comes to casting is the stars. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling are the perfect Barbie and Ken. Robbie embodies the character of Barbie. Not only does she look like the perfect stereotypical Barbie doll, but I really enjoyed her portrayal of a toy come to life. Then there's Gosling, and I mean, he is literally Ken. He, for me, is the best part of this movie. He was non-stop hilarious. Even rewatching, I was laughing out loud just at his facial expressions. Then there's the music. I of course enjoyed I'm Just Ken, but the songs throughout were fantastic. The opening sequence of Barbie's morning routine, as well as the chase sequence through Mattel, had such great songs behind them. I'm sure plenty of people who are fans of I Spice, Billie Eilish, or any of the many other talented artists are going to love this film's soundtrack. I really loved Barbie. It's very funny, it's full of charm and emotion, and a very powerful message that I think can impact anyone. However, when it comes to Mattel's future plans to create films about their other IPs, such as Hot Wheels and Uno for some reason, I doubt it will see the same overwhelming success that Barbie is currently receiving. The final film I watched in July was Talk to Me. This is the brand new horror film from directors Michael and Danny Filippo, who some may know for their YouTube channel Raka Raka. Talk to Me is about Mia, who, on the remembrance of her mother's passing, goes to a party where she uses a possessed ceramic hand which connects to the afterlife. The rule is to stop holding the hand after 90 seconds, otherwise the spirits will want to stay. And you guessed it, Mia, for no fault of her own, holds onto the hand for far too long, and the consequences prove to be deadly. Now, I foolishly assumed that Evil Dead Rising would be my favourite horror movie of 2023. However, Talk to Me may be taking that spot. For one, despite Talk to Me being a lower rating at 15 while Rising was an 18, I was actually more squeamish for this movie, with a couple of scenes involving the character of Riley. It definitely reminded me of the twins' previous work on their YouTube channel in terms of the style and camera movements, and I also remembered that I was definitely far too young to be watching their videos at the time, but this film is just some of the best modern horror I have seen. The movie is very energetic, to say the least. I mean, every transformation, each time the person lets in a spirit, it's similar to the camera movements in films like Upgrade, with a fast shutter speed that tracks the subject, which was very nice. Now, there have been a lot of bad horror movies set in the modern day which use social media and things extremely poorly. However, Talk to Me is just right in its implementation of mobile phones and Snapchat, and it relates to what I interpreted to be the focal point of the film, which was drug use. The hand was definitely an addiction for Mia, and when you see the scene where the young teenager Riley is practically peer pressured into using it, that message becomes much clearer. But what was best about this was how it flipped a very common contemporary horror trope. This is when the character is basically told the solution to the horrors haunting them, and yet they completely ignore that and wind up getting killed. However, for this, with the topic of addiction, the solution is to simply stop using, which is easier said than done. So I did appreciate the way that they took a contemporary horror movie problem and flipped it to instead service the story that they were telling. If you're a horror fan, this is a must-see for sure. Talk to Me is a lively, terrifying, profoundly touching horror movie which absolutely surprised me, not only with its quality of scares but also its narrative. That is everything for the month of July. Now it's time for retro and recommendations, pieces of media from the past few decades or even years which I think deserve some love today. First up, to prepare for Oppenheimer, I was in a bit of a Nolan mood and decided to rewatch the Dark Knight trilogy. This trilogy goes over the journey of Bruce Wayne as he becomes the Dark Knight Batman and faces terrible foes and ultimately sees his end. First is Batman Begins. We all know the origin. The son of a wealthy family becomes orphaned in the streets of Gotham. He runs away from his city and trains as a living weapon. Years later, he returns as the vigilante Batman. In this grounded approach to the famous hero, Bruce Wayne battles with none other than Cillian Murphy as the Scarecrow, who plans to pump his fear toxin throughout Gotham. Now, coming back to this film, I was surprised by how good it was. I feel Begins is always swept under the rug in conversations regarding the trilogy, but it was a really good adaptation of Batman's origin, which I found was the best example of the balance between the grounded approach that Nolan wanted to go for and the comic book charm. This is also definitely the best journey for Bruce's character out of the three movies. Dark Knight is still perfect, sure, but Bruce is absolutely sidelined for the iconic villain in that movie. I would argue Begins is the perfect introduction to Batman. It ticks all the essential boxes for story beats and the style of the character, and is just on its own a nicely tied up journey for Bruce Wayne. The sequel is The Dark Knight, and what more can be said about this film? The Dark Knight has entered another status in the realm of pop culture. Some of the most iconic lines are still referenced today, and it has had a tremendous impact on the Batman mythos, which has and will continue to put pressure on the future creators handling the Caped Crusader. With a few years of experience as Gotham's protector, Bruce Wayne begins to see hope for the future of his city, with outstanding District Attorney Harvey Dent sweeping criminals off the streets in a more legitimate fashion. This is all before the Joker arrives and unleashes a hysterical storm across the city of Gotham that brings even the Dark Knight to his limits. This movie is just too good, honestly. Everything is fantastic, most of all Heath Ledger as the Joker. It's a performance everyone knows, whether you've seen the film itself or a clip on YouTube or one of the hundreds of references in other media. It's a performance that's so terrifying and yet you can't look away. Heath absolutely carried this movie to new heights, and it's just such a shame that he passed away so young. Then finally we have The Dark Knight Rises. After years in exile, Bruce is forced to come out of the shadows once again to go toe-to-toe with Bane, played by Tom Hardy. Along the way, he starts a complicated relationship with Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, played by Anne Hathaway. Honestly, rewatching The Dark Knight Rises, I was massively disappointed. A lot of this final movie just didn't work for me. Personally, I feel Nolan sort of dug himself into a hole by making the previous two films more grounded, as it left little room to develop. However, it meant that doing the more bombastic destroy the city plotline in Rises just felt so out of place, and personally I just couldn't connect with it. Plus, Bruce's character is more sidelined than ever, and whilst Tom Hardy was good as Bane, even his character is sidelined for what is meant to be a surprising twist that is honestly just confusing, unnecessary, and relies far too much on the previous movies to even understand. The ending was kind of bittersweet for me. It was a nice positive end, but at the same time kind of forgot the fundamentals to Batman. The trilogy as a whole, however, is still spectacular. I loved every minute of the first two films, and even then Rises did have some good moments. If you're a fan of Batman, then you've already seen these movies, but watch them again, why not? And if you're someone who's never delved into any of this character's stories, then there is no better place to start than here. And that is everything for July. Another really just spectacular month, not only with Oppenheimer, but also with the other blockbusters like Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones, and a new Wes Anderson movie. It's undoubtable that this month's releases will be revisited for the 2023 Academy Awards, with so many incredible performances and artistry on display. If you like this video, please subscribe, pass it around, all that lovely stuff, and tune in next month for my reviews of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Good Omens Season 2, Meg 2, and much, much more. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.